When I saw her wedding ring in the trash, I felt my chest tighten in a way I hadn't known was possible. It was just lying there, half buried under crumpled receipts and yesterday's takeout containers, catching the morning sunlight like it had a life of its own. That single, gleaming circle of gold made my stomach drop, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. How could something so small carry so much betrayal? The day had started like any other. I was humming softly while flipping through the morning newspaper, the smell of coffee curling around me like a warm blanket. My kitchen was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of traffic outside. It was supposed to be a calm Wednesday, but by the time I spotted the ring, the quiet had turned heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Her announcement had come only 2 days earlier. My daughter-in-law, Marissa, had called me in a tremor of excitement and tears to tell me she was pregnant. "I'm going to be a mother, Mom," she had said, voice high with happiness. She held my hand like I was the most important person in the room. And for a moment, I felt that familiar warmth, the one you feel when the universe seems perfectly aligned, when everything is right. But as I picked up the coffee mug and my eyes drifted to the trash, my heart sank. There it was, the wedding ring I had given her last year, meant to symbolize love, commitment, and trust. And now, tossed aside, like it had no meaning at all. I remember staring at it for what felt like hours, even though it was probably only a few minutes. I could hear the ticking of the old wall clock, steady and unyielding. The smell of the coffee had turned bitter in my mouth. My hands were shaking when I lifted the ring from the trash, holding it between my fingers, feeling its cold, hard weight. It was heavier than any piece of jewelry had a right to be. The confusion hit first, then a wave of anger, then a deep, aching sorrow. How could she announce a pregnancy, something so sacred, while hiding this? The thought felt impossible, absurd, but my hands kept trembling. I put the ring down carefully on the counter, as if setting it there would somehow lessen its impact. Marissa came home later that morning, humming as she hung her coat on the rack. She didn't notice me at first, too caught up in her own excitement. "Mom, I can't wait for you to help me plan everything," she said, eyes bright and shining. She reached for my hand, and I could feel the warmth, the affection she had so carefully built around herself. But that warmth now felt like a mask. I forced a smile and hugged her lightly, trying not to show the storm that was brewing inside me. "Of course, honey. I'll help with everything," I said, my voice calm. Too calm, even to me. The silence that followed was thick, and though we chatted about nursery colors and baby names, all I could see in my mind was the ring in the trash, a glaring, undeniable signal that everything I had believed might be a lie. The rest of that afternoon passed in a haze. I moved around the house, folding laundry, washing dishes, avoiding Marissa's questions about baby showers and ultrasound appointments. Every time I passed the trash can, my eyes darted to where the ring had been. It was gone now, probably tossed into a bag for the garbage collection. I felt a pang of panic. What if I had imagined it? But no, I had held it in my hand. I had felt the smooth, cold surface of that circle of gold, and I knew. Dinner was a tense affair. My son David, unaware of my inner turmoil, chattered about his day at work, while Marissa enthusiastically explained her plans for a new nursery theme. I smiled and nodded, all while my mind replayed the image of that ring, over and over. Something was off, terribly off. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the living room, coffee long gone cold, staring at the muted glow of the television. I kept thinking about the ring, about the announcement, about the way she had held my hand when she told me the news. Was it possible that she had married someone else before telling David? Or that the ring symbolized something else entirely? My thoughts spiraled, questions multiplying faster than answers. I remembered a small detail from last week. Marissa had left the bathroom door slightly ajar while brushing her hair. I had noticed a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume, floral, sweet, not hers. At the time, I dismissed it. Maybe a new lotion, I thought. But now, With the image of the discarded ring burned into my mind, nothing seemed dismissible anymore. Every little detail, every tiny inconsistency, became a thread in a larger, terrifying tapestry I couldn't yet see fully. I went to bed that night feeling hollow, the usual warmth of home stripped away by suspicion and dread. The clock ticked steadily in the background, each second a reminder that life, as I had known it, was shifting beneath my feet. Sleep came fitfully, dreams crowded with images of Marissa smiling, holding my son's hand, while somewhere in the shadows the truth waited, mocking me with its silence. By the time I woke the next morning, the feeling of unease had settled deep in my chest. I knew I couldn't ignore it. Something was wrong, something that would change everything. And though I didn't yet know the shape of the betrayal, I felt certain it would be devastating. I had to find out. The morning light poured softly through the kitchen blinds, painting long stripes across the worn oak floor. I moved slowly, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. The aroma usually comforted me, but today it felt heavy, almost mocking, as if the smell itself knew my mind was restless. I replayed the memory of that ring over and over. It wasn't just gold in a trash can. It was a symbol, a signal of deception I hadn't wanted to see. I tried to focus on normalcy. David was at work, and Marissa had taken it upon herself to clean the house while humming to some podcast I didn't recognize. I told myself repeatedly, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe it really was just misplaced. But the memory of how she had held my hand, tears in her eyes as she announced the pregnancy, now felt like a performance I had been tricked into witnessing. By mid-morning, my unease had morphed into quiet observation. I started noticing little things, the way she avoided eye contact when I mentioned the nursery, the faint, nervous tremor in her voice, the way her hands fiddled with the edge of the kitchen towel instead of helping fold laundry. Small, subtle, almost unnoticeable gestures that, in another life, I might have overlooked. But now they screamed. Later, I found myself in the living room, flipping through photo albums with a hand that trembled slightly. Old wedding photos, birthday parties, family vacations. Every picture suddenly seemed laden with possible secrets. Had she always been hiding something? Or had it only begun after we welcomed her into the family? The questions spun in my mind like a carousel I could not escape. I noticed David's obliviousness. He was so infatuated with Marissa, so trusting, that he had never once seen the shadows that now clouded my vision. I wanted to protect him, shield him from the possibility of heartbreak, but my instincts whispered a harsher truth. If I stayed silent, this secret could ruin everything. That evening, Marissa and I sat down to make a list of baby names. Her enthusiasm felt forced at times, as if she were aware of the storm building behind my eyes. "What about Emily?" she suggested, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. I nodded mechanically, unable to match her energy. My mind was elsewhere, tracing back to every small oddity I had noticed in the past few days. It wasn't until she went to throw out some garbage later that the first real clue hit me. She came back, brushing her hands on a kitchen towel, and for a moment, something slipped. A flicker of hesitation, almost like guilt. I watched her closely. "Where's the bag you just took out?" I asked casually, my voice lighter than I felt. "Oh, just the usual trash," she replied, but the faint tremor in her voice betrayed her. I paused, letting the silence stretch. That pause was enough. My mind immediately returned to the ring, shining cold and bright in the trash only 2 days ago. Could it have been there again? Or had I imagined it? The doubt gnawed at me, fierce and insistent. The next day, I found a moment to check the kitchen trash while she was out running errands. My hands trembled as I sifted through the bag, and that's when I saw it again. The edge of something metallic glinting among coffee filters and paper scraps. My breath caught. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled it out. It was unmistakable, her wedding ring, just as I had seen it before. And this time, there was something else, a folded piece of paper tucked beneath it. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, almost clinical, and the words made my stomach churn. "I can't keep this from you any longer," it read. "If he ever finds out, everything will be over. I need him to stay happy, even if it means hiding the truth from everyone." I stared at the paper, heart hammering in my chest. What truth? What had I been blind to all this time? The room felt smaller, tighter, almost suffocating. I sank into the chair, pressing the letter to my chest as if holding it close could absorb some of the shock, the betrayal. Later that evening, I tried to confront her gently. "Marissa, we need to talk," I said, my voice calm, though my hands were still shaking. She looked up, startled. "About what?" Her tone was smooth, but there was an edge to it, a defensive sharpness I had never heard before. "The ring," I said, letting the word hang in the air. She froze, eyes widening slightly, and then looked down at her hands. I could feel her tension, the way it radiated like heat from a fire. She swallowed. It's not what you think," she said, voice quivering. But I could see the hesitation, the flicker of shame, the hesitation before the lie she was about to offer. I pressed on. "Then explain why it was in the trash, 2 times, and this letter, what is it about?" My words were measured, deliberate. I needed answers, not excuses. Her eyes darted to the kitchen floor, then to mine. The silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "It's complicated. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I held up the ring, letting it catch the kitchen light. "Just what? Tell me the truth, Marissa. Please. For your child, for my son, for all of us." The tears started then, quietly at first, and then more freely. She looked like a child caught in a storm of her own making. And in that moment, I realized just how tangled the web was. This wasn't just about a ring, a pregnancy, or even me. It was about trust, love, and the delicate balance of family life that she had managed to tip without realizing the damage. I stepped back, letting her gather her thoughts. I needed clarity. But more than that, I needed to understand how to move forward without destroying the fragile threads that still held our family together. And as I watched her sob quietly in the corner of the kitchen, I knew the days ahead would be a careful dance, between revelation and restraint, between anger and understanding. The next few days were a slow, quiet storm. I kept my distance from Marissa, all while observing her carefully, piecing together every gesture, every word, every pause. She moved through the house with a kind of nervous grace, careful not to brush too closely against the truth that now lay between us like a fragile, invisible glass. David, blissfully unaware, continued his routine, work, gym, and late-night calls with Marissa. He came home one evening whistling, exhausted but happy, carrying a small bouquet of flowers he had picked up on the way home. "For you, Mom," he said, handing them to me with a smile that made my chest tighten with guilt. How could I carry this secret alone while my son lived in blissful ignorance? I placed the flowers in a vase on the counter, inhaling their faint, sweet scent. They were beautiful, but their fragrance now felt tainted, colored by the shadow that Marissa's deception had cast over our home. I tried to focus on small, mundane tasks, folding laundry, rinsing dishes, wiping counters. Yet every time I heard the hum of the refrigerator or the soft tick of the wall clock, my mind returned to that ring and the folded letter. It wasn't until late one night, when the house was quiet and only the dim glow of the hallway light cut across the living room floor, that I finally decided I needed proof, not out of spite but out of necessity. If I confronted her again without knowing the full story, I risked shattering everything without reason. I began to pay attention to her routines, her phone calls, the emails she tried to hide. I noticed her whispers with an unfamiliar voice over the phone, always brief, always ending abruptly when I came near. The soft scent of her perfume changed sometimes, Floral, sweet, then musky, unfamiliar. Each little observation, trivial as it might have seemed to anyone else, became a thread pulling me closer to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to fully face. One morning, as I was tidying the bedroom she shared with David, I found another small clue. A receipt tucked inside a drawer, expensive dinner for two at a restaurant I didn't recognize. The date was recent. The handwriting on the receipt was hers, but the tip and signature hinted at someone else, someone hidden. My stomach knotted. She had been careful, meticulous even, but no one is perfect. I confronted her again, this time with more resolve. "Marissa, I need to know who you've been seeing," I said, my voice quiet but firm, the kind that leaves no room for evasion. She froze, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. It's not what you think," she said, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But the hesitation, the way her eyes darted to the floor, betrayed her. I could feel my pulse quicken, a mix of fear, anger, and heartbreak all colliding inside me. "Then explain it," I urged gently, though my hands were trembling. "Tell me the truth. No more hiding." She looked up finally, eyes wet, lips trembling. I married him last month," she admitted, her voice a whisper that barely carried across the kitchen. "I didn't want David to find out until I knew it was safe. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be sure." The words hit me like a cold wind. My knees felt weak. Married already? While announcing a pregnancy? My mind scrambled, trying to process the layers of betrayal and secrecy. Every little sign I had noticed, every strange perfume, every whispered phone call, now made sense. But knowing didn't make it hurt any less. I sank into a chair, clutching the counter for support. "Marissa, how could you?" "My son, the baby. Everything," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "I love him," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt him. I thought I was protecting him, protecting us." Her words were honest, in their way, but honesty didn't undo deception. It didn't undo the image of that ring in the trash, the carefully folded letter, the secret dinners and hidden calls. I realized then that I had to confront this carefully, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in a way that brought the truth into the open without destroying the fragile threads of family still holding us together. The next morning, I spoke with David privately. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun slanting through the blinds, painting the familiar stripes across the floor. "David, we need to talk," I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm, steady. He looked up, concern immediately crossing his face. "Mom, what is it?" I took a deep breath. "It's about Marissa, about the ring and the letter I found. I need you to know what's been happening before it goes any further." I explained everything, careful not to exaggerate, careful to convey the facts as they were, letting him see the betrayal without twisting it for dramatic effect. The shock in his eyes was immediate. His hands gripped the edge of the table, and I could see the storm of emotions behind his gaze. Disbelief, anger, hurt, and confusion. "Mom, I can't believe this," he finally whispered. Why would she hide this?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we need to face it together, carefully, without letting anger ruin what we still have. Secrets like this fester in silence. Truth gives us a chance to heal." He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "You're right," he said, his voice quiet. "I need to hear it from her face to face. No more hiding." That evening, we called Marissa into the living room. She sat across from us, trembling slightly, the weight of her guilt visible in every movement. David spoke first, calm but firm. "Marissa, tell us everything." "No more lies." She began to speak, her voice quivering but determined. The words tumbled out, the secret wedding, the fear of losing David if she revealed it too soon, the panic when she realized the timing of her pregnancy announcement would only complicate matters. As she spoke, I listened, feeling the storm inside me slowly settle into a quiet ache. though betrayal still burned in my chest. I realized something crucial. The truth, once spoken, gave us a chance to navigate the aftermath together. Pain, heartbreak, and anger would be inevitable, but deception could be ended, and healing could begin. The next days were a careful dance, a mixture of cautious observation, tentative conversations, and silent reckoning. David had made it clear he wanted the truth, unvarnished and complete. And Marissa, now stripped of her defenses, was starting to face the consequences of her choices. The tension in the house was palpable, a quiet hum beneath everyday life, like the distant thrum of an approaching storm. I found myself walking softly through the rooms, observing her as she moved. She avoided my gaze at times, fingers fiddling with the hem of her blouse, eyes darting like a cornered animal seeking escape. And yet, there were moments of vulnerability, fleeting, fragile, when I could see the real Marissa, the woman who had once held my hand and promised to honor our family. It made the betrayal even more complicated. One evening, as I was putting away dishes, she approached me quietly. "I want to explain properly," she said. Her voice was low, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. I turned to face her, hands still wet from rinsing plates. "Go ahead," I said calmly, my heart thudding in my chest. She swallowed and took a deep breath. I married him before I told David about the pregnancy. I know it was wrong, but I was scared. Scared he would leave, scared I would lose everything. And then, when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked even more. I thought if I kept it quiet, if I pretended everything was normal, I could protect him and the baby. Her words trembled, raw and unpolished. I could feel the weight of her guilt, heavy and suffocating. "Marissa," I said softly, "I understand fear. I understand wanting to protect the ones you love. But deception isn't protection. It's a slow poison," she nodded, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "I know, Mom, and I hate myself for it. I never wanted to hurt David. I never wanted to hurt you." I studied her face, seeing the cracks of vulnerability, the remnants of honesty beneath the shame. This was no longer just a question of anger. It was about understanding, about navigating a path forward without letting betrayal destroy us. The following morning, I decided to take a subtle but deliberate action. I needed to ensure the truth was completely exposed, but I also wanted to maintain dignity. I invited Marissa to help me with a small home project, asking her to gather items from the bedroom we shared for a minor reorganization. As she moved through the room, I quietly watched her, noting the way she treated each item, the slight hesitation when handling David's personal effects, and, most importantly, the way she glanced at her own possessions, avoiding the wedding ring she still wore. It was a quiet form of accountability, letting her confront the tangible reminders of her choices without confrontation. I wanted her to see the weight of her actions reflected in the small details of our home, to internalize the consequences in a measured, human way. Later that afternoon, I spoke to David again, careful to balance honesty with emotional clarity. "You need to know everything, David," I said gently. "She's been honest about the marriage now. The pregnancy announcement, the hidden wedding, it's all out in the open. You have a choice in how to proceed, but I want you to understand the context. Fear and love are complex, and her decisions, while wrong, were not born of malice." David ran his hand over his face, exhaling deeply. "Mom, I don't even know how to feel. Part of me is angry, part of me is hurt. But I can see that she's scared too. I want to handle this carefully, without letting my anger destroy her or our child." I nodded, relief washing over me in quiet waves. My son was approaching this with maturity, compassion, and the clarity of someone willing to face the truth without letting emotions dictate destructive choices. It gave me hope that, despite betrayal, our family could survive. That evening, we sat down together, David, Marissa, and I, and had the conversation that had been long overdue. I let them speak openly, without interruption, without judgment. Marissa recounted her fears, her reasons, her regret. David listened, asking questions with measured patience, his anger tempered by love and understanding. I offered guidance only when needed, my words calm, reflective, and deliberate, like a hand steadying a trembling bridge between two hearts. The ring, once a symbol of deceit, now became a pivot point, a marker of accountability. Marissa agreed to temporarily set it aside, to focus on transparency and rebuilding trust. It was not about punishment, but about restoring integrity and demonstrating commitment to the family, to the truth, and to her unborn child. Over the next few days, subtle changes began to manifest. Marissa moved through the house with a lighter step, the tension in her shoulders easing as she became more transparent in her actions and words. David, too, softened, balancing the anger that naturally lingered with compassion and the willingness to forgive. I watched quietly, grateful for the slow rebuilding of trust, for the acknowledgement that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal with patience and honesty. By the end of that week, I realized something profound. Deception had revealed character. Fear had caused mistakes, yes, but love had prompted courage, accountability, and a willingness to face consequences. The house, once heavy with tension and suspicion, now felt slightly lighter, as though each word of honesty and act of transparency had lifted an invisible weight from the air. And in the quiet moments, I found myself reflecting, betrayal doesn't have to destroy a family. It can teach, it can illuminate, and it can challenge us to see the humanity in each other, even when that humanity falters. The weeks that followed were a careful balancing act, a dance of rebuilding trust, nurturing understanding, and redefining boundaries. Marissa committed herself to transparency in every small action, from telling David about her day to sharing honestly about appointments, finances, and even fleeting doubts or fears. I observed quietly, allowing her space to demonstrate her sincerity, while also protecting my son from further deception. David, in turn, proved more patient than I could have expected. He listened without interrupting, asked questions without judgment, and even began including me in conversations he had with Marissa. He wanted to make sure that our family, the one still intact despite the fissures, remained strong. Watching him, I realized that love does not vanish in the face of betrayal. It evolves, reshaping itself around honesty, accountability, and empathy. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the kitchen, the scent of simmering tomato sauce filling the air, listening as Marissa laughed softly at a story David was telling. The laughter was tentative at first, hesitant, but it grew warmer with every word. I felt a pang of relief, the kind that comes when the storm has passed, but the clouds are still lingering, waiting to be fully dispersed. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. Marissa would flinch at small remarks, a flash of guilt crossing her face when something reminded her of the wedding ring or the lies. David would tighten his jaw when memories resurfaced. And I, as the silent observer and guardian of the household's emotional balance, had to tread carefully, offering guidance without judgment, support without overstepping. Then came the day we finally spoke openly about the ring. Marissa placed it on the counter in the morning light, its gold surface gleaming softly. She looked at it for a long moment, tears in her eyes. This is a reminder, she said, her voice trembling. A reminder that I can't hide from the truth. That I have to be better, for him, for the baby, for all of us. I nodded, reaching out to touch her hand gently. And you can be, I said. It won't be perfect, and it won't always be easy. But honesty is the foundation. You've already taken the first step by facing it. David, watching quietly, smiled faintly. We'll get through this, he said, and I could hear the unwavering sincerity in his voice. It wasn't just forgiveness, it was a promise to rebuild together. Over time, life regained its rhythm. The house, once heavy with unspoken suspicions, now felt lighter, more open. Conversations flowed freely, laughter returned to rooms that had been quiet, and even Marissa's nervous habits eased as she grew more comfortable living in truth rather than secrecy. I found myself reflecting often, thinking about that morning when I first saw the ring in the trash. The shock, the anger, the heartbreak, they had all been valid. But the journey that followed taught me something essential. Betrayal, while painful, can reveal hidden strengths, test love, and ultimately bring growth if met with patience, courage, and compassion. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in muted oranges and purples, I sat on the porch with my cup of tea. I watched David and Marissa laughing together over a story their child would one day hear, the faint sound of their joy echoing through the backyard. A deep sense of peace settled over me. The betrayal had not destroyed us. It had transformed us. I realized that life isn't about perfection. It's about confronting the imperfect, embracing the uncomfortable, and making choices that honor love, truth, and integrity. Marissa had faltered, yes, but she had also shown courage. David had been hurt, yes, but he had also demonstrated the depth of patience and understanding. And I had learned that sometimes the best way to protect those you love is not to shield them from pain, but to guide them through it. In the quiet of that evening, I thought about my role as a mother, a grandmother, and a keeper of family values. I understood now more than ever that mistakes do not define a person. How we respond to them does. The wedding ring, once a symbol of deception, had become a reminder of accountability, growth, and the resilience of love. And as I sipped my tea, watching the sky darken and the first stars emerge, I felt a quiet hope. Not a naive hope that life would be free of challenges, but a grounded hope. The kind that comes from knowing that honesty, patience, and courage can mend even the deepest cracks. As I sit here, recalling everything that happened, the shock of the ring in the trash, the hidden wedding, the fear, the tears, and the long, quiet days of rebuilding, I realize just how fragile trust can be. But I also understand how strong it can become when people choose honesty, accountability, and love over secrecy. Life isn't perfect. Family isn't perfect. We all make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, and sometimes the people we love hurt us in ways we never imagined. But what matters most is what we do next. Do we lash out in anger? Do we retreat into silence? Or do we face the truth, however painful, and find a way forward? Marissa made mistakes, yes, but she also had the courage to admit them. David was hurt, yes, but he found the strength to listen, to understand, and to forgive in order to protect the life they were building together. And I had to learn to step back, observe, and guide without controlling, to balance my instincts with patience and empathy. Watching them now, with their baby on the way, I feel hope. I feel peace. I feel the reminder that betrayal does not have to destroy love. It can, if met with honesty and courage, transform it. So I ask you, dear viewer, have you ever faced a betrayal that shook your family to its core? How did you respond with anger, with silence, or with courage? Life may not give us perfect choices, but it does give us the chance to rebuild, to forgive, and to grow. If you've been touched by this story, I hope it reminds you that honesty, patience, and love can heal even the deepest wounds. And if you want to hear more real-life stories of family, betrayal, and redemption, make sure to subscribe and join me on this journey. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.